everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and I finally got myself a Glock 44. Yes, this is one of my own guns. I actually picked this thing up yesterday from Shields here in North Texas. I've been holding off on getting one of these and waiting for all of the reviews and all the people that I trust to tell me if it's worth it or not. Well, some people say it is, some people say it isn't, but I really wanted one. Right now it's the great ammo shortage of 2021, and I've really kind of fallen in love again with shooting .22, so I had to pick it up. My first impression of it before I even put the first rounds through this thing is I'm actually pretty impressed with the quality. When it comes to the lower of this, it looks and feels just like a standard Glock. When it comes to the upper, it's a lot of polymer, but it doesn't feel cheap. They claim this is one of the most reliable .22 pistols out there when it comes to just plinking and range time, so let's find out. This is going to be the first 10 rounds through this gun. That was an ammunition problem, not a gun problem. Same thing again. All right, so that was fun. It looks like I only had 2 issues in both of them. The striker did hit the rim of the case, so that is not the gun. They are hits pretty solid, so it's not a light primer strike either. This is just the nature of .22. Well, I gotta say, it shoots like a Glock for me. It feels like a Glock. The trigger reset is absolutely the same. I like that. So if you like shooting Glocks, I think you're gonna like this. And I shoot it low and to the left, just like I shoot Glocks. So no surprise there. So I'm going to hand it to them on consistency. I'm going to load these magazines back up, put some more rounds down range, see if my opinions change as I get used to it. All right, so one thing I've noticed when it comes to loading these magazines, and I guess it was a complaint when they first came out, is these are pretty big magazines, but they only hold 10 rounds. I know that Glock said it had to do something with the reliability, and I know that since the .22 long rifle is a rimmed cartridge, you got to worry about it stacking in the magazine right for reliability, but it looks like there's plenty of room in there to at least put 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 more rounds if you alter the design of the follower. I don't know. I'm sure there's something in aftermarket that's going to come out or has already come out to help increase the capacity of these things. But Glock definitely needs to look at designing a magazine that can hold more than 10 rounds. But let's put 20 more rounds down range and see what happens. Alright, so let's check the accuracy in my grouping here. I had 1 failure to feed that time. Now you guys have seen all 40 of the shots so far, and there we go. This has been in pretty rapid succession. I really wasn't going for the tightest group. I'll try that in just a moment for longer range, but overall I do shoot it low to the left, but the grouping is pretty darn good. I'm going to load this thing back up, and of course I'm going to have my wife shoot it. I bet she's going to love it. She loves .22, so let's find out what she thinks. right, so for these last magazines, I'm going to try to go for accuracy. Take my time. I got the target set at 10 yards. I know this is not a target 22. It really has more of a duty trigger in it. So I'm not expecting the greatest results, but let's see what I can do with it. Well, I'm not very proud of this grouping, but I've never really shot 22s all that well. But let's take a look at it. I'm a little embarrassed of this, but of course, I'll always be honest with my reviews and my personal marksmanship, so you guys can laugh at me here. So this, I think, is a horrible group at 10 yards, but it is a Glock. So some of you guys may laugh. I don't know. I think I shoot it pretty consistently, but this time, as you can see, I was trying to compensate, and now I'm to the left, but high. Well, I did my very best. Well, I gotta say, overall, I'm pretty happy with this thing. The only reliability issues I had was more with the ammo than I did the gun itself. I do definitely have a few thoughts about it, things I think Glock can improve, and some things I really, really like about this. But let's get back to the garage and I'll talk more about it there. All right, so we got this thing back from the range. Once again, I got it cleaned up and taken apart, and I've discovered a few things about it, which is going to factor into my final thoughts. All right, so let's break this down. Let's talk about the range report itself. How did the Glock 44 shoot? I gotta say, it shot exactly like I thought it would. And it shot like a Glock. It did not shoot like a target pistol. It honestly feels like a Glock 19, just in 22. And I know a lot of people are not going to like that. They're going to expect a little bit more precision out of a 22. They want it to feel different. I actually like this. This, I think, is a fantastic training firearm. This is a gun that I could easily let somebody try out before I move them up to a 9mm if they are a beginner shooter. And so what I like about this is the fact that it feels and functions like its bigger brother. The trigger, it's a Glock trigger. It feels exactly like, I think a lot of the mechanics and a lot of the internal parts are exactly the same as a Glock 19. So here's kind of a close-up of it. So in that way, I really do like the gun. It feels like its big brother counterpart, just chambered in 22. Reliability, let's talk about that. The only issues I really had with it was ammunition. It was not the gun itself. So as you saw with the range footage, I had a number of times where the cartridges simply didn't go off, but the rims were definitely hit. So it was not the gun's problem. I didn't have any failures to feed, any failures to eject. It was 22 related ammo problems and not the gun. So after about 250, maybe 300 rounds, I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed with its reliability. Didn't have any issues whatsoever. Now, let's talk about its accuracy. Now, its accuracy is not as good as other 22s that I've shot, and I'm gonna hold that to its trigger and the fact that it's a really heavy trigger for a 22. Normally when you're shooting something that has such low recoil, even in the cheaper, less expensive guns, they really do strive to have a light trigger pull, something that's a little bit easier for target shooting. This uses a duty style trigger. And so like a typical Glock 19, and I mentioned this in the shooting portion, I shoot it low and to the left. So this would be a great gun for me to work on shooting Glocks better with, because I can put a lot of rounds down range and not spend a lot of money and work on the problem that I have consistently shooting all Glock models. So let's now talk about the fit, finish, and function. Well, the function of this gun is exactly the same as a Glock. It is the Gen 5 type of frame, so you have ambi slide controls, you have the reversible magazine catch. All the manual of arms is the same as the big brother Glocks. Now, when it comes to the fit and finish of the gun, I gotta say I really like what Glock did, because the 22 has less power. When it comes to cycling the action and cycling the slide, gun companies that are designing the 22 have a number of different options and ways to go. So you have some companies that are like Ruger when it comes to, let's say, the 45 or the 22-45 and the Mark II, Mark III, Mark IV pistols. Essentially, you have a large receiver that has a very small slide in the back, so the slide doesn't have a lot of inertia. So that is one way of being able to take the power of the 22 and be able to cycle it in a semi-auto. Then you have other companies that will essentially take a large gun, scale it down, and make the entire slide out of a very cheap and light material. So for example, if you have, let's say, the Colt 22 1911 that I recently reviewed, you have a full-size 1911 slide, but it has to be made out of a very light material, sometimes zinc, sometimes aluminum. And so you have this massive slide that can still be cycled with the power of a 22. Glock, however, goes about this completely different. They have what appears to be kind of a metal chassis. In fact, if you look at the side of the gun here, you can actually see on the bottom of the slide, it's a little bit more reflective there, a metal strip, and it's on both sides. And that's actually kind of a chassis that has this plastic or this polymer slide that is built over it. So what you have here essentially is the ability to have a pretty solid feeling slide that is not made of pot metal, zinc, aluminum, something that feels cheap, looks cheap, and difficult to really finish well, but they take their polymer technology and apply it to this. So the polymer is extremely light and it's overmolded a metal chassis, and it actually really does work. I'm really impressed with that. So most of the time, my complaints with 22 pistols, even the ones from the very reputable companies, they always feel cheap to me. Now, I know what you're saying. Glock is a polymer handgun. It's going to be cheap. Yes, I know that, but it's a quality polymer. It doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart. It doesn't feel like the design of it or the fit of it or the way it's molded is cheap. It doesn't feel insignificant. It actually feels like a gun. You definitely feel a weight difference, but you definitely know that you're holding a firearm. Or sometimes when I'm holding some of like the Umarex or the Walther copies of other guns, as I said, like the Colt 1911 or maybe like the Smith & Wesson M&P, it doesn't feel as much like a firearm. It feels like a toy. This feels like a gun. So it has some weight to it. It has some mass to it, but it's also extremely light. And I'm really impressed with the idea of what they did, taking a slide with the displacement of a Glock 19 and getting the weight down where it could cycle 22 pretty darn reliably. So I like the fit, the finish, and the function of this. Now, there is one issue that I discovered. In fact, I talked about this on the Texas Gun Vault 2, my second channel. I discovered that there is an inherent design flaw with this gun. I can't take the gun apart and show you on camera because YouTube doesn't like that, but I can explain what it is. When you disassemble the slide, you have to depress something called the firing pin spacer to take the pressure off of the back plate so you can remove the back plate. Normally in most Glocks, they'll wear out around 5,000 or 6,000 rounds. However, in these G44s, people are having premature wear. And so after 250 or 300 rounds, I'm already seeing an indentation on this firing pin spacer. And if this spacer indentation gets too deep, you can't depress it and you can't get the back plate off anymore. So I know what you're thinking. Why don't you just go online, buy that little spacer and replace it like you can do on other Glocks? In fact, you even did a video on this a few months ago, and yes, I did, but it turns out that all of the firing pin spacers are the exact same diameter except one model. And you guessed it, the G44. So some people are thinking that because it's a different part number and the diameter is different, they're using a different quality of polymer in this spacer. It doesn't seem to be a problem that happens on all G44s, but many of them do have it, and there is an option. There's a company that has come out in aftermarket with an aluminum spacer. You can't buy this spacer from Glock. You can't buy it from Brownells or Midway USA. You can't do that. They don't sell the part, even though it turns out Glock is aware that this is an issue. They claim it is normal wear, but there's a couple of people that have posted online that indentation has gotten so bad, they had to take it to a gunsmith who had to really kind of like drill it out to get that part out, and to even get a replacement part was a real hassle. So I'm very disappointed in Glock. In fact, I contacted their customer service trying to get a couple of these spacers, and they said they do not sell them and nobody sells them. I kind of find that to be a little bit disheartening and a little bit shady on their part, especially when they know it is a known issue. And you can buy the other spacers for like $3 at Brownells. I'll be happy to pay $10 for a couple of these spacers, but they don't want to sell it. So I'm going to go the aluminum route because I don't want to lose the ability of taking my gun completely apart. So it seems to be a worthwhile upgrade. And when I get it, I'll probably make a video on it and talk about it as well. So that is a huge knock against the G44, is that design flaw that Glock does know about. But besides that, everything else I really do like about this. This is definitely not a target gun. It is definitely a duty practice gun, if that makes any sense. I would not use this gun for self-defense unless 22 is the caliber that you can handle. That's the only caliber you can handle. I would definitely look at getting something a little bit bigger, maybe something in .380. But for a range, plinker, let's have fun, or a training gun where you're like, okay, I want to work somebody up to a 9mm Glock 19 or Glock 17, I'm going to start you out on this. You can learn the basics of safety, handling, how Glocks operate, and then immediately move them up to a bigger caliber. So how would I rate this on my scale, my 0 to 5 star scale? Well, when it comes to the G44, I'm going to give it, I know it's a very specific rating, 3.75 stars out of 5. Not as high as I was hoping. I feel like for the fact that it is a Glock, they shouldn't have that design problem, which is really the biggest issue that I have with it. Everything else seems to be well thought out, and it's a Glock. So what else can I say? It is a Glock. It shoots like a Glock, and that's why I like it. So there you go. So my range report and thoughts, and what I discovered about the Glock 44, chambered in .22. Really cool gun. I'm glad Glock came out with it, but it still needs a little bit of work. And so hopefully with that aftermarket part that I'm buying, I'll be able to fix it. So do you guys own a G44? What do you think about it? What are your thoughts? And do you have the firing pin spacer issue? Let me know in the comments section below. And as always, thanks for watching.